Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration, vision, and real connection come alive. Wherever you are, you belong here.
Welcome to the Love Pod, everyone. My name is Nathaniel. I am your host today, and I'm really pleased to introduce our special guest, Aly Cardinalli, who is a witch doctor, who is a performing arts specialist, and also a psychic master educator with over 20 years of experience. You're a multi-spiritualist, Aly, and your family's raised you in a very spiritually inclusive environment. You've had exposure to all kinds of indigenous remedies. You are a respected exorcist as well, which I find really interesting. I'd like to talk with you more about that. You're an author of 6 books, is it?
Yes, 5 books, but my sixth book is coming out mid-May.
Awesome. And I just love to and also you studying kahuna healing, which I find really interesting as well. I just like to introduce or welcome you to introduce more about yourself and who you are and why are you do this beautiful work.
Thank you so much. And hi, listeners. Hi, viewers. Hi, everyone. Like I said, like Nathaniel said, my name is Aly Cardinalli, and I am a witch doctor. A witch doctor, in order to have that title, we have to be an expert in 9 different areas.
Mm,
One of which is performing arts, where I spent a big chunk of my life, because it takes so long to be an expert in anything performing wise. When I was in the performing arts, I have directed and choreographed 136 productions.
wow.
I was an expert in 18 styles of dance, and I'm an award-winning director and actor. I also have my degree in voice, and I can vocal coach 7 different vocal styles.
That's so
So
cool.
there's that chunk of my life. But in the meantime, there was the spiritual side. So my grandmother was a witch doctor on my father's side,
Mm,
and she was from Sicily. My mother's from Germany, and so I learned the old Germanic druid ways
mm.
from her, and then I was raised in Hawaii. So I got this
Wow.
very broad spectrum of indigenous practices and creolized practices because, of course, some of them died with colonialization and
Mhm.
imperialism.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Well, you and I share some background experience in indigenous wellness, and I mean, I'm trained in ceremony and like doing sweat lodges and things, so more like Turtle Island specific indigenous practices. And it's been such a rich part of my life. I've learned from so many different elders, and we're really in a time nowadays, Ali, that people are hungry for this knowledge that's literally has the potential to save our world and return us to more coherence and our roles as stewards of the land rather than this dominating force that came through with like more of the imperialistic colonial kind of paradigms, right? So, what has your journey been like? Because this is like very out of the box stuff, and I can imagine it hasn't always been an easy journey to be like a light of and a representative of some of these things that a lot of people might have fear around. Or you want to share a little bit more about your journey in that regard?
Absolutely, and thank you for that opportunity. I guess I'll start with the type of medium I am. So I recently wrote a book last year called The Seven Psychic Paths, and in it, in the second half of the book, I talk about the 11 different types of mediums, because what we're familiar with are death mediums that talk to the human dead. That's what's easy to commercialize, and humans are obsessed with ourselves. So there's that aspect. But as I'm sure you know, and I would love to help our listeners know, that before commercialization, there were a lot of indigenous types of mediums. And the kind of mediums that I am, one of which is a dark medium. So I interact with the creatures that go bump in the night. And in a world of a highly, even if people aren't Christian, still we live in a Christian narrative
Hmm.
culture. People would find that scary,
Hmm.
especially my family. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine a 6-year-old talking to monsters in the shadows would be
Yeah.
quite scary, and you would think
Hmm.
that's probably
Hmm.
a demonic child. But it was just the kind of medium I
Hmm.
am. I'm
Hmm.
also an oracle, which means that I talk to different deities or spirit guides or upper world entities
Okay.
without the need of tools. It was really difficult. My older sister is a death medium, and she told me just don't entertain it, stay away from it, just don't
Mm,
look at anything, just don't. Um, but I found that through my grandmother's teachings, I could actually help an awful lot of people because I can interact with the entities that people are afraid of, which is
mm,
why I started moving into exorcisms, because
mm,
I can actually interact with them like a
mm,
spirit zoologist.
mm, mm. Interesting. Well, I have had some of my own experiences, and I wouldn't even know what kind of I mean, even using the term medium, I would say like we all have our different gifts, right, and how we connect and the different expressions. And I've seen some of these ones that some might call demonic or whatever. I see them as like armored ones, and my on all my interactions with different levels of consciousness in that regard is that there's some level of shielding that has taken place, usually related to some ancient wounds sometimes with and some of the expressions that can carry. And also I think about like a lot of our understanding or miscomprehension of life in general. Like, I mean, like in indigenous circles, we talk about all our relations, and that includes the crawlers and the all the ones underneath the surface, and the less than the ones that go that I mean, there's a whole world that happens in the unfolding at night, which is a very important part of the world and our the cyclical nature of everything. So I can imagine as a young boy that would be, very maybe even isolating if I had to guess, like for you to have these kind of gifts and, to deal in a society that likes to avoid anything that is unpleasant to think or talk about and maybe even deny entirely the existence of. So how have you embraced these gifts and brought them into a way? It sounds like, focusing on serving others and helping that relationship, but it sounds like there's probably a very nuanced journey in between that.
Oh, thank you. I've always been an educator.
Mm,
Uh, so it's just part of my being. Like if we go down to the root of who I am, even though I have certain skills and gifts, who I am as an educator. So whether it was performing arts, I also taught math and English. I taught for the National Guard. I've always been an educator. And as an educator, I found that there is a deficit in the spiritual community for educators. Now, there's an awful lot of masters, but
mm,
as I'm sure you know, master is not the same as educator,
mm,
and they don't necessarily have the same skill set.
mm,
And so I don't consider myself a master in
mm,
everything I teach,
mm,
but I hope to facilitate
mm,
a environment to make my students better and smarter than me. So I did start my own school, the BearBridge Academy of Witchcraft and Psychic Development. It started with 8 students, and now we have 3,500 internationally. We are the
Wow,
largest school. Thank you. We are the
that's
largest
incredible.
school for witchcraft and psychic development in the United States.
Okay.
And we have 5 departments. We've gotten so big. We have our psychic department, our witchcraft department. We have our belief department, which includes shamanic practices and various different religions. We have our healing department, and we have an outreach department where we offer free things to the community. And we also have in person retreats twice a year, but everything is live and online. That way, people who are discovering don't have to worry about either their neighborhood culture or their familial culture. They
Mm.
have the privacy and accessibility of having me in your living room live to interact with, to help teach, or my other teachers from around the world.
That's really awesome, man. And I'm wondering, like in that experience, I mean, we are in such a different age where people can access things. Before, I think people had to read a lot of their own books if they were interested in a certain subject matter. And now you have this, sounds like a very holistic school. And what kind of like there's obviously an edge to calling something witchcraft because there's a lot of, like you said, mainstream religious views that would see that in a certain way because of their paradigm beliefs. But a lot of my understanding, witchcraft, call it medicine, like the medicine people, the traditions, like even it's funny in indigenous circles, the word shaman can have negative connotation. I know the origins comes from Russian indigenous medicine people, but there's and there are fine lines. There are people out there who have not are not always safe, who are calling themselves shamans and maybe haven't developed a certain level of mastery in their, and things can go wrong. I feel like I don't want to call it an epidemic, but there's definitely a conversation around people, who are leading, plant medicine retreats, where, they're having like two facilitators for like a group of 50 people, and people are, not always coming back the same or coming back at all. So I feel like we're in this time where there's a lot of change. People are looking for those interconnections to connect back to the land, to connect to who they really are. And sounds like you've created a thriving ecosystem with a lot of different domains that people can do their own learning and find where their fit is in their resonance. And I would imagine too, in a society where there is still that polarization of religion, that's an edge. So it takes courage, right, to do those things. What has your experience been in seeing this thing grow from like 9 students into 3,500? That's a huge growth.
Thank you. It is a massive growth. I have learned just a few really beautiful things in show business. If one person has all of the voice, the show is trash.
Mm,
You have to bring in lots of other people to bounce ideas off of and make sure that it becomes beautiful. And with that, because we grew so quickly, I set up a system where I could not be the only voice.
mm,
So we have a position that's actually based on Druid culture called the
cool.
white coat. And that person is voted yearly by the student body. They vote who represents the student voice, and it can be
Mm,
any student in the school.
mm,
And that person then oversees the council.
mm,
Our Witches Council is a volunteer auxiliary board. They are an advisory board, and they also make up our department heads. So, again, these are people who really care about education, they care about the specific fields that they're in charge of.
okay.
And I'm the head of the belief department. So I oversee the shamanic department and the different religions that we teach at BearBridge. And what makes BearBridge unique is that we are not associated with any one religion, whereas
Mm,
most places to go learn are. And that makes us unique in that we are so inclusive, and that our moderation in how students interact with each other has to fit that people cannot put their beliefs or limiting beliefs on other students and
mm,
how
mm,
they practice.
mm,
That in and of itself has made an incredibly safe place for people
mm,
to learn and ask questions and discover, knowing they're not going to be ridiculed by someone else's doctrine.
mm, mm. That's there's so much wisdom in that, and I feel like a big part of what I see in this weird time that we went through with all the algorithms that basically push content to serve your belief and just to amplify your own model of the world. I feel like one of the lacking things we were talking before the show is like diversity of perspective and thought. And I feel like the
Yeah.
more conversation we have, the better, rather than avoiding certain topics. We should talk more about them so that we can come to those bridges. So I love you call it Bear Bridge. Those bridges
Thank
in
you.
consciousness where we can, share like, and even this conversation, light and dark, and I know there's all different kinds of domains of witchcraft and traditional healing arts and all these things that are being more embraced, but maybe are still viewed as like alternative, subject that are controversial in mainstream lenses. And yet these are part of indigenous traditions, like you said, whether it's Hawaii or Germanic Druidry or Italian, like all of our cultures come at some point from an earth-based indigenous spiritual connection to the earth, with its own unique paradigms and perspectives that add to the beautiful tapestry that is humankind. And so I love that what you've created. What has been your biggest learning in doing this so far, Ali, would you say?
Oh, my biggest learning is I have to give a shout out to my counsel. They're hidden behind the scenes. They're not very public. Um, but I learned they teach me all the time that I cannot do it all.
Mm,
I with I mean with my career, I have a very ambitious resume, and they have taught me that there are times I push too hard. I fill my schedule too much. And in healing arts, even if it's just on the education side, I mean, people are very vulnerable in the education side. I have learned that I get worn out, I get burnout. I'm giving too much, and then that spreads me too thin.
mhm.
So my council manages how many classes I'm allowed to have on my schedule. And they have enforced a rule where once a month I have a mandatory 4-day weekend where I'm not allowed to answer anything, I'm not allowed to interact. And um, I mean, show business teaches you that there is no such thing as life balance.
Mm, mhm,
You don't get to show what's going on in your life when you
mm,
step on stage for other people. It's a service of selflessness. But that can't be in spiritual arts. It's a horrible model. I'm not
mm,
modeling what I am
mm,
teaching.
mm,
And so my counsel has taught me that that has been my biggest learning curve
mm,
is balance.
mm. Isn't it ironic that you can't show who you really are in show business?
I know
You
it
know?
is, isn't it?
Well,
I
and
mean,
this
there's
is
always that
yeah,
element, but
yeah.
you don't. And what's funny is the style of education that we do at BearBridge is the indigenous share learn style.
Okay.
So it is not sit, lecture, listen. It's interactive
Mm,
and it's all contextual. So
mm,
you understand why things are the way they are,
mm,
and it's very interactive.
mm.
Um, because that's how things used to be taught, right? Through
Yeah.
story and relating it, everything from our shamanic classes to our witchcraft classes to our psychic classes,
Mm,
and making sure people feel seen and heard. Because I saw this beautiful thing a long time ago that said, people of all things, people don't feel loved because of the love languages. They feel loved because they feel witnessed.
mm,
They may
mm,
feel witnessed in various different ways, but they feel loved when they feel witnessed. And
mm,
at BearBridge, we hope our motto is we want you to journey into your truth, not someone
mm,
else's.
mm,
And because we offer so many things, um, our goal, my goal as headmaster and as an instructor, is we don't want you to end up in a class that isn't part of your journey. We
mhm.
want to help you find what fits for you,
Yeah.
and it just makes a beautiful place to learn safely.
Yeah. Yeah. So important. Having that trust allows you to be vulnerable so you can be witnessed. It sounds like you have a lot of that love supporting you in this journey, Ali. So I'm happy for you that you have that kind of
Thank
counsel
you.
who supports you in that. To me, you know, I feel like that's what we're yearning for as a species, and would be wise to return to in as quickly and authentically a way as we can is true community. And it's recognizing our interconnection and whatever diversity of views that we have in life. Like there's those common threads like that you talk about, like being witnessed, being loved. We know we need these things. How do you find, I'm curious, with such diversity and such a large kind of assortment of things and people finding their own path, have you had, experiences that, catch you like by surprise? Is there like conflict that arises like with maybe divergent viewpoints within the work that you're doing?
Um, I Because people follow the behavior agreement, even in my free classes, I just have this question. I just have this statement that says, please feel free to ask questions from your point of view and your faith.
Mm.
And of course, I don't know the history of every faith for 63,000 years. Like, I
Yeah, of
just,
course.
who does? I don't, where am I going to pull that from?
Yeah.
But I'll do my
You're not
best.
allowed to.
And
Your
if I
council
don't,
won't let you.
and if I don't know it, I think I have a resource to find it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I want people to feel safe to ask questions from their point of view. And that also means that people need to allow questions from points of view that may be different from their own
Mhm.
and to be respectful to their teachers.
Mm.
So, what I have found, my biggest struggle, and this is rare, but it has been my biggest struggle, is in Hawaii, the teacher is one of the most respected positions you can be in. Whereas on mainland culture, it is not.
Mm.
And so that has been always been a shock to my system
Mm.
when people feel the entitlement to be disrespectful to a teacher.
Mm.
And there is um, a level of earned respect that they sit in that should be acknowledged. Now, I don't think that it should be a dictatorship at all.
Yeah.
However, there should be a culture and respect around education, and that sometimes is the most difficult thing. For instance, I have had a student that got extremely disrespectful, and I paused her and I said, "I'm not going to allow that behavior." And we we can have this dialogue, and I can explain the nuances of whatever we were talking about. Um, and she said that I work for her, and I
Mm.
said, no, you're not paying to own me. You're paying to be educated. But if you refuse to be educated, then you're throwing your own money away.
Mm. Mm.
Right? There has to be a willingness to
Mm.
listen from our elders. And that's another aspect in Hawaii that I wish would be a part of the rest of the United States, is we have such a reverence for our elders
Mhm.
that we don't have on the mainland. And it's probably the saddest part of our spirituality. I think there's such a urge to become knowledgeable like an elder without having worn the shoes down.
Mm.
And why not listen to those who have worn the shoes down so that our journey doesn't have to be so tough?
Yeah, you and I are in very strong resonance in terms of this. I mean, the majority of the time after I graduated from Indigenous Wellness, uh, I my first real foray into it was taking care of a seniors program at an Indigenous Health Access Center in an urban environment, and there was like people who are like Inuits and Cree and Anishinaabe and Ongwahongwe and all kinds of various cultures all in one group. And it was interesting too, because when I started, I was so nervous, Ali. I was like, how am I gonna take care of this group? There was like people with dementia, people who were like residential school survivors, people who were blind, deaf, um, who had mobility issues, and I was, expected to take them on trips, and it was a beautiful time. It was like it was one of the most biggest growths of my personal self for 5 years. I was a coordinator and then became the team lead, and we did a lot of like home care and stuff. And the stories of some of these people grew up in the bush on the trap lines, and see like the amount of change that they saw in a lifetime is just incredible. And this was one of the intentional models of colonization, was go remove the children from the community, because then you can have control over the culture, right? And so that, to me, that those two um, doorways, when I had visions of community centers, and what would really bring that back was having like child to the children close to the elders again, because we think a lot like, oh, it's so nice when children get to spend time with their grandparents, and we don't reflect on how inherently ageist Western society is, and we cordon off those two age groups, and we make them irrelevant until past a certain age they're irrelevant, and before a certain age they're irrelevant, and they are the doorways of the spirit world. They like are. And I think one of the distinctions that really came clear to me is like there's a difference between a senior and an elder, right? An elder has done their work, they're the veils are thinner and they're accessing their gifts and they're more in alignment. And a lot of the children coming through, I don't know your experience, but I'm witnessing like there's a lot of old souls coming in up, raising the vibration in our world. Like we're going through a massive transformation right now. And anyways, I all to say is like those two groups coming together are so important because not only the children get to learn from the seniors or the elders that we commonly think, yeah, they get to learn from their wisdom or stories and stuff, like you said, but also the elders get to relive their youthfulness and be full of laughter and see these little ones who are just so funny and so full of life and so much curiosity and that is like to me a really important cornerstone of true community and those intergenerational connections are just so pivotal. And I just want to just reinforce what you're saying. I think that reverence and I love your approach and correction of that because this is like the consumer model of education. It's like I paid to be here. You are my employee all of a sudden to a professor. Like what an audacious, arrogant stance to take in life, right? And yet I know that that is the common rhetoric because I have a background in public, well, community college of program development, and I've been a professor as well, and I've heard this kind of narrative, and it's interesting. So I appreciate you bringing that into conversation because I think it's an important conversation.
Thank you. I would like us to turn back to those old times. On the other hand, our structure of how we educate is also not effective.
Mm,
The colonial style education, which we are still doing, is not effective learning style. And I wish that in our pedagogy that we would go back towards story-based
mm,
or relation-based education, even in how we learn. And like I said, my certifications are through Department of Ed and Department of Defense. What's effective in learning can even just be how you shape the room. And if you even shape the room in a U, as if there were a fireplace in the middle
mm,
or a fire in the middle, it is the most effective environment for people to
mm,
learn because
mm.
they also can see each other.
Yeah, yeah,
And we learn more when we can see each other's faces
yeah.
and see how other people react to what's happening.
Mm,
When everybody can't see each other, then you're stuck in a world of no relation to what you're
yeah,
learning.
yeah. Great
And
point.
that's just one aspect, but there's so many aspects to effective education. And I also, as an educator, I like to thank my students because if I didn't have students, then I'm just a crazy person sitting by myself talking about what's effective and what isn't effective in education. No one will listen.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's mutually reciprocal, right? And like I mean there's the lifelong learning model of education, right? And I mean, one of my Tai Chi Sifus was he was a member of Nipissing First Nation, and so he would teach Tai Chi and the other martial arts based on his indigenous teachings as well. And I feel like those synergies and synthesis of these, seemingly disconnected things, bringing them together, um, recognize the importance of the environments we teach in. And I totally agree with you. Like whether it's a U or a circle where people are, that's what I loved about being in circles is like the elder sat with us. Yeah, they had a role to facilitate and hold space and stuff, but they were not above us, standing looking down at us as an authority. They were there in their authenticity, and that was their authority. And they didn't have to demand respect. It was just inherently like, yeah, they've walked those moccasins down a few times, and yeah. I mean, this is a much larger conversation. And how have you found, like, you? What's interesting I find about you, Ali, is you have these like high level credentials, and then you've brought it into like a very maybe unorthodox kind of uh, place to reintroduce these learnings. What is your higher vision for all this? Where would you like to see this go?
I have the misfortune of, as an exorcist, seeing humans at their darkest times
Hmm.
and most desperate times. As a witch doctor, even when I'm hired for witchcraft, people don't hire me as a first resort,
Hmm.
right? They come to me when the systems failed them, when things are dire. And I used to, before I turned 40, my goal with all these credentials was to be on the 40 under 40 list. And then I turned 40, and with all the things that I had accomplished, I didn't get on that dadgum list. And I thought, what was the point? What can I do with all of this? I don't have a long-term goal anymore
Hmm.
because I recognize how fragile humans are, how
Hmm.
fragile my life is. And I am definitely too type A to live just in the moment. I have a huge whiteboard of all the things I would love to do this year, but I like to take it 1 year at a time.
Hmm.
And just what are the goals? How can I affect not just my businesses, but also the people around me in a grounded spiritual way? And I don't mean spiritual as in woo woo. I really do mean grounded.
Hmm.
I sit in a thought that spirituality means connection.
Hmm.
We connect to ourselves. It teaches us how to connect to each other, to connect us the quantum areas that we as dense meat sacks don't understand. Spirituality teaches us how to connect. And so, how can I do that in a grounded way? And with my purpose being an educator, I always think, how can I do that through education? Whether
Hmm.
it's through authorship, finding other brilliant educators and try and bring them into the school, um, figuring out new ways that technology can help boost education, and then also fight the fight for fake education. I
Hmm.
like to call it TikTok witches, where they're
Hmm.
getting these tiny little snippets. They're so tiny and not and out of context that it's actually promoting cultural erasure and
Hmm.
saying, I love that you love this. This is not education. This
Hmm.
is just a taste. We
Hmm.
need, if you like the taste of cupcakes, it doesn't make you a baker. We need to get you into class to learn to bake. Come
Hmm.
here. Come and
Hmm.
learn the beginning
Hmm.
and learn all of it, not just
Hmm.
I like this taste of cupcakes.
Hmm.
Also, as I'm sure you're aware, with the people you mentioned who hold shamanic circles, there's 2 to 50, and people get injured or sick. There is, what I like to say is, there are lots of people who live in houses that pretend to be architects.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
they're not an architect just because they live in a house. Now, it's not to say they can't become that, so let's learn it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's where I don't believe in cancel culture. I
Hmm.
believe in redirection.
Hmm.
In no, let's just learn the additional things.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the internet is an angry place
Hmm.
where people are releasing their anger in subjects they don't know anything about because they're not connecting spiritually to other things. And
Hmm.
that energy has to go somewhere.
Hmm.
So it goes into the comment section, it goes into attacking other people.
Hmm.
If we go again back to the mud, the issue is their spirituality is fractured and they
Hmm.
need to connect somehow,
Hmm.
because how they're connecting is showing up in a fractured, toxic way. And God, I'm not perfect. I do it too. I get away from it. But to loop back to your question, where do I see all this going? I hope the school continues after me. The council's trying to build a system. I thought it was just going to be a little school, but it's become so much more than me now. I hope that it continues and more people hear about BearBridge Academy. And then in the meantime, while I move from my maid phase through into elder, I'm just going to keep on teaching and writing until my last breath. I'll just keep sharing.
Mm. That's beautiful. I feel like when we're really on purpose and on soul purpose, where there is no retirement from that. It's just there's the next there's the next expanse, whatever that is. And so much of what you shared, I really value it. Like the pillars of Light Heart Vision are connection, community, co-creation. And that first pillar is like the first pillar for a reason. It's like you can't go jump into co-creation and start like, hey, let's do some projects and all this stuff without first connecting to that source of your nourishment, that absolute, that creator, that, whatever that wellspring is for you, that you have that unique relationship. I think all of us have a unique relationship with it. That's one of the beautiful aspects of creation itself, is like we all have a unique relationship with our creator, and however we want to describe it. And one thing, to be a mirror of the miraculous to Aly, because I have gently nudged some other friends, and I just want to shine a mirror on you. You talked about like the quantum versus the dense meat suits that we are, and I have a differing view that I'd like to offer you, because one of the important things I mentioned, the Christ letters in our talk earlier, and one of the things that I feel really needs to help to heal in our world, and I'm sure it's represented in so many of the different domains and things in BearBridge Academy, is our relationship with our mother, Mother Earth. And one of the things that I find is so healing in the letters is he talks about how he didn't refer to Mother Divine Consciousness in those times, because the dogmatic religion of his times saw women subordinately. But in the letters, he goes into detail about how Divine Mother is like whereas the Father is the intelligent will of life. It is the activity, the yang, you could say, the it's the intelligent love that expresses as electricity. The mother is the purpose. It's the nurturing drive. It's the bonding and rejection that is the twin impulses of the loving intelligence that physically manifests as all form and as the magnetic drive. And what I find very interesting, and what's been so soothing to my heart from that synergy between all the knowledge and experience I've had from many indigenous knowledge carriers and elders, and my own direct experiences and ceremony things with my own direct experience of Christ consciousness, is seeing the mother in forms that, there's this sentiment in a lot of indigenous traditions, and I'd be curious to know if it's reflected in the ones that you've studied, is like, we are the land. And I feel like when we view our lands as our bodies as an expression, a symbiotic expression of the land, of Mother Earth, then we have an opportunity to even expand our view of what stewardship is. It includes doing things like breath work and taking care of our doing yoga, or however it manifests, or learning our medicines and learning how to properly take care of our voice and perform and express and all those things. Like they all come together. And so I just wanted to offer that to you, because I hear that worded. I always kind of like, I laugh, because to me, it's like such a funny way of seeing us as humans. Because I do believe, like there's the other extreme of like total identification as the body, realizing that it is ephemeral and is transitory and it is part of this fabric, but also recognize like it has its own like infinitely deep and wise consciousness. So I just wanted to bring that in the conversation, because yeah.
I think it's a spectrum, right? Because not every human in even if we use genealogy, Now, we as people have always been spiritual from the beginning of humanity, which
Hmm.
I love to point to the book Star Dot Ships as a
Mm.
brilliant book that takes us through, and the dot is a period, star period ships,
Okay.
by Gordon White. And to really explain that we have always been spiritual,
Mm.
we weren't agrarian first, we were spiritual first. We
Yeah.
created agriculture around spiritual sites,
Mm.
not the other way around. Um,
Interesting.
that we've always been spiritual. However, um, in my experience with interacting with, I guess, high level spirits, that they have the ability to present themselves in a much more complex way to us so that we can understand them. And that's why I think we have a ways to go in our evolution. We have to continue the breath work, we have to continue the spiritual work so that the next generation, those genes have changed, and
Mm.
the next generation can take it even further, and the next generation can take it even further, and we can keep evolving spiritually
Mm.
so that we can access and understand more than what we have and
Mm.
hopefully can make better choices. I also have experienced that in my world as an exorcist, that one doctrine alone is just not correct.
Mm.
It just is not enough information. And we don't understand how the pieces all fit together, but they aren't singular.
Hmm.
One is not correct. That is man's making of creating spirituality into sports teams and saying, I choose this one's mine, and that one's not mine. And they're not sports teams. We need to say,
Yeah.
what if the world and the spiritual world is much more complicated than we have yet to understand?
Hmm.
That what if all of the faiths are correct and they're more like continents
Mm.
in the vastness of the spiritual world,
Mm.
and all we have written down is one person's point of view visiting one continent?
Mm. Mm.
What if that's the case? And that's where I think that we are dense meat sacks, is because we have a tendency to use spirituality like it's a sports team
Mm.
instead of, I'm going to do my best to use it to connect, to be the best version of who I'm supposed to be,
Hmm.
and to know that I'm just not going to get it all.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I very much appreciate that perspective, and it reminds me a lot of, that humility. And I feel like humility is often, misunderstood. Sometimes we have these big words that have huge depth of meaning, but to me, humility is like that wonderment of all that. And that's what I was pointing to, like when we think of the body, is like there's such an intelligence, a loving intelligence in all of life. It's so deep. I mean, anyone who starts going within, because a lot of people don't go within and they just see
Mm.
things from the material, the meat suit level. But when we really go into all the amazing cooperative nature of the cellular matrix and the energetic body and all that stuff, it's like there's like a universe within all of us. And
Oh, there really is.
isn't there? And so like this concept that any of us can not only know the vastness of it all, then like I've heard Eckhart Tolle talk about this like in very funny terms. He always laughs, when he talks about it. He's like, then to think with five vowels and a handful of consonants that we could explain it to one another. It's like it's so ridiculous. It's like a big cosmic joke,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. It becomes kind of a cosmic joke. In fact, when I train psychics, and I can never remember his name, and I really need to try to refine his name. There is a brilliant double PhD out of Italy, and he explains the psychic phenomena, that what the psychic experiences is true. The fallacy happens in what they already know and how they try to explain it.
Mm, mm,
That's when there becomes fallacy.
mm,
We as people try to put things in boxes and
mm,
try to compartmentalize, and then we also edit because we try to make assumptions based on what the sitter wants, instead of just be a vessel and just give what you get, which is
Mm,
what I teach. I'm like, stop being a sleuth.
mm,
Just give what you get. Let
mm,
the other person be a sleuth. And
mm,
when I've done missing persons cases, it's really important for me not to try to do the policeman's job
mm,
or the detective's job, to just, this is what I have.
mm.
I'm just the information.
Yeah,
Here you go. This is
yeah,
it. Let them do, that's their kuleanas, in
yeah.
what we use in Hawaii. It's not mine. I don't have those credentials, so I'm not going to guess.
Mm,
Here, it might be useful, it might not be useful. It's not my job.
mm,
It's your job. And
mm,
as a psychic, I think a lot of reasons why there's these psychic debunkers, is because psychics, how they interpret with their, small vocabulary, might be incorrect.
mm,
It's just how we're saying it, or
mm,
how we're trying to explain
mm,
it.
mm,
So for my psychic students, I'm telling them all the time, keep learning, keep learning, keep learning, keep learning. For instance, I had a student do a reading for a live sitter, and she said, I think I have your grandmother here, and she's Muslim. And the sitter said, no, she isn't. And I said, let's try again. You're making an assumption she's Muslim because of how she appears. Why don't you just describe what you see?
mm,
And so she described, this is what I see. And the sitter said, oh, that is my grandmother. She was an extra in Lawrence of Arabia.
mm. Wow. Okay. Meaning, eh? Meaning. And
Yeah.
I just want to plug this in because, I didn't talk a lot about the context of the letters with you, and I feel like it's important to know, like, they really do challenge a lot of some of the beliefs out there, and not, like, I love your inclusivity and not to like challenge beliefs, but one of the things he does say very plainly is that, we are all psychic. It's just a
Mhm.
fact of reality. And so that would, that alone would probably trigger some, traditional Christian people, like just the thought of that. But when we realize we're part of this larger field, however we want to describe it, the quantum, and we are interconnected all this life, I've heard other elders, and I'm in agreement with sending, like, there's some, we often describe, like, there's some spiritual people, or there's spiritual people having a human experience. And I really like the idea that this is the spirit realm. Like, we're spiritual people having a spiritual experience, and this is just a certain density of it. And, how it comes into play and how we treat it is going to be how it expresses in our world. So I agree, with what you're talking about, like us having a conscious um, responsibility in terms of how it evolves collectively and how we focus and how we nurture our role in that, and continuing to do our own work, whatever our true path is. It's important to recognize that we do have a path, and it's to us to find that. You've brought up the
I fully
exorcism.
agree.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I fully agree with you. I, in my book, The Seven Psychic Paths, I talk about the history of psychic people um, in, in relation to religion. And if we could have an alternate reality where the Spanish Inquisition did not happen, and people who are psychic were not hunted, and that gene pool was diluted, then my job as an educator would not be at the adult level. I'd be teaching fifth graders.
Mm,
I would be
mm,
teaching fifth graders, this is who you are, and this is how psychics work. And it shows up in you this way, and it shows up in you this way, it shows up in you this way. That would be my job.
mm,
It
mm,
wouldn't be people who realize what I've been taught is incorrect.
mm,
I think I'm more sensitive, and I'm more than an empath. There's something different. And then they find me, and I show them, this is how it shows up for you, this is how it
mm,
shows up for you. And they see in class other psychics. I'd be doing it for fifth graders,
mm.
because
That make
it's part of our genes.
mm,
It is biological to be psychic. And then how it expresses itself is spiritual.
mm. Yeah, very interesting. I like your perspective, Ali. And with all the knowledge that you have, I'm curious. The question that comes to me is, what is your perspective on why, like, the unfolding of, colonialism and try the suppression of these more um, expansive levels of consciousness and gifts of our natural innate gifts. What do you think is the root cause of that intention to suppress that and to change and to control other cultures? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's fear.
Mm,
It's fear. It's always been fear. Fear of not having. So if you can't figure out, if the fear of not having can't propel you to have skills to compensate, then it propels people to take it away from others.
mm,
It's fear. I think the reason why people like me were hunted for thousands of years was because I had an advantage. And even now, even within the spiritual community, you see this dialogue of don't use your gifts for you. Come on. Then are you saying that a tall person should get on their knees so that they don't reach the top shelf at the grocery store because they have that gift? That's ridiculous.
great.
Instead, why don't you make a friend who's psychic and really
Yeah.
sensitive and ask them to reach the thing on the top shelf for you?
Mm,
Right?
mm,
Why can't we celebrate that each
mm,
other are slightly different and that everybody has different advantages instead of Dr. Seuss did it great in his book, the Sneetches on Beaches with the stars that are ours. It's brilliant. And I'm like, this is the world we live in, where it's you have this, but I have this. And it's this fear of not having.
mm, mm,
And if we instead celebrate, and I'm not saying be grateful for what you have,
mm,
because I feel like at times that can lean into toxic positivity
mm,
when people don't have.
mm,
I think instead we should be, and again, this is very Hawaiian, celebrating outward
mm.
and trust that other will also celebrate you.
Yeah.
But if you're in a culture of celebrating outward,
Yeah.
it will loop back around. Other people will also be part of that culture.
Mm,
Celebrate out. If you see somebody that looks fantastic, tell them.
mm,
Celebrate out
yeah.
instead of I wish I had,
Mm,
or finding something wrong about them.
mm,
Celebrate out.
mm. I love that, and to me, I'm a big proponent of creating culture of gratitude, celebrating the wins of others, even the smallest wins, the biggest wins.
Mm.
I mean, I would love to see everyone thriving in an abundant life, whatever that it means for them, and we're in this weird toxic culture where I think we're prescribed what that means. Like that means you should have a mansion and a private jet. Well, pardon me, but if we all had private jets in this world, that would be a very terrible world. I mean, it would not be fun.
It would not be fun.
There'd
And
be lots of
honestly,
jet
I don't want a
accidents.
mansion. That's a lot of place to clean. I just don't I don't want a mansion. I just don't want it. I'm like
Yeah.
that's I've raised kids. That's a lot of
Yeah,
area to
exactly.
clean.
Yeah. Maybe palatial living where we can live together and have our spaces and really, interest. But I mean, that's again is like that's for different people. Some people like want a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and that's abundant life to them because they have the wilds. There you go. That's where Allie's gonna go. That's
It
awesome.
is.
I mean, I really appreciate it. I was going to ask you about because you brought up a few times, and I know it's a core part of your thing, and maybe one of the more uncomfortable things that you are called to do. But also, you did bring it up as like meeting people in their most challenging places, and I know for like a lot of service providers, in even the mainstream, like these are things that are sometimes our natural gifts, whether it's like you have a natural propensity to altruism or compassion, and it can have impacts. What is your experience like when an individual is going through something like a possession or and you have to go through this level? What's going on and how do you help that? And what's like why does it happen? Like what is the root? Because I feel like it also just contextually in my mind, I see it in many subtle forms in our society and maybe isn't always like necessarily an entity, but it comes through in like unhealthy marketing, unethical kind of entanglements that, subliminal messaging and all these ways. And so I'm curious if you want to share a little bit more about that to maybe alleviate some of that fear that someone might have if they are suspecting this and having a place that they could turn to, meeting someone like yourself or someone who does similar work.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm sure when people see me, they wouldn't like watch me walk through the grocery store and say, that's an exorcist, right? Like I don't give
Yeah.
that look, whatever that look is, like I'm not brooding and carrying a cigarette and like hiding whiskey in my pocket. Um, I like to smile, and I also believe that the spirit world has its own ecosystem, which is
Mm,
kind of why I'm not why I it's my point of view because I'm a dark medium, and I just understand that there are spirits and how some of them are parasitic and some of them are carnivorous and some of them have motive. But the indigenous way of spirit mediation and extraction is much more peaceful than the Catholic version. In fact, the Catholic version, from an indigenous standpoint, would be considered barbaric
mm,
because it is very aggressive, and it starts with violence from the practitioner.
mhm,
And if you start with violence, of course, it needs to defend itself if we
mm,
come down to a
mhm,
spiritually primal level.
mhm,
And unfortunately, it only has a 20% efficacy rate.
mm,
Whereas if we go back in time to any continent and look at the extraction methods and the mediation methods of spirit, it can be a lot more peaceful.
mm,
My experience, and I've done over 150 exorcisms, 75% are peaceful and frankly easy. There's no razzle dazzle. It's there's no spectacle. It's not a
mhm,
show.
mhm,
It's if you figure out what the entity needs and how it got there,
mhm,
it's pretty easy to then give it what it needs or supply its basic needs, like
mhm,
we all need,
mhm,
and then get it out. The next issue is to make sure that we get the human back to a health structure.
mhm,
Otherwise, we can have a new entity enter the space,
mhm,
and then there becomes a blame pattern of
mhm,
the practitioner wasn't successful, but they were successful, but we still need to heal you, and something else got in.
mhm,
So if we look at the language we use really doesn't matter. If we look at the spiritual body, and if it has a hole in it, then certain entities can crawl in that are generally parasitic.
mhm,
They can use that space like a shell
mhm,
and could creep in where a crab is weak and just like crawl in.
mhm,
The weakness can happen in 7 different ways.
mhm,
People like to think that the invitation is the most common, which is why in a lot of movies it's a child because they get tricked in invitation. But unfortunately, the most common victims or afflicted of spirit possession are people who struggle with addiction.
mhm,
And here we go back to a structured narrative of what the viewpoint is with people who suffer with addiction that they also have, and there's just a lot of blame on
mhm,
that person instead of looking at it like this person is vulnerable
mhm,
and I can't extract this spirit until we make sure we have a plan afterwards because
mhm,
we need to get this person whole again.
mhm,
Otherwise, we're going to continue the pattern, and we
mhm,
want to make sure that this person stays safe and that you don't call me again, right?
mhm,
You don't,
mhm.
we don't want a punch card system with an exorcist.
Yeah,
You
right.
don't want to call me again. Let's
Fifth
get it
time is
done and
free.
be finished.
Yeah.
Um, so that's 2 ways. Another one is prolonged torment. If
Mm,
someone is tormented, and it's interesting that you bring up subliminal messaging because some of that creates a cognitive torment.
mm,
Even people who are struggling to get health care are tormented by not being able to get care, and
mm,
they can become victim.
mm,
And then there's also infection. So
mm,
touching things that we're not supposed to touch. And that's
mm,
again, listen to your elders. Don't touch things that you're not supposed to touch.
mm,
If I had one client who went to Egypt and there was a very big sign that said do not touch, and there was even one of the velvet ropes, and he still reached across and touched it. And then I got called
mm,
because he got it was like a paper cut in his auric field,
Mm.
and something was able to jump in. So I got called to remove it and patch him back up, because we have to do the patching up
Mm.
afterwards as well. In my work, like I said, 75% of it is peaceful. The human, we are extreme in our spotlight syndrome,
Mhm.
where we think it has motive and it's out to get us, but a lot of times there isn't that motive. We're not as special as we think we are.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're
Mhm.
it's not you specifically. It's just
It's like
there.
free
And
rent
if
at a house. It's like, oh,
right,
there's a house.
yeah, it's not like I need this house. It's a house. This will
Yeah.
work. I'm good. So if you again work on its basic needs, then you remove it, and then of course we have to deal with the cognitive distress of the human finding out that they're not that special, and that it's
Mm.
not that much of a novelty. And so there's also that aspect. Now, in when I train exorcists, and at BearBridge we do have a vigorous training to go through if people want to become an exorcist. There is the psychological aspect,
Mm.
because there are about 14 different psychological obstacles that can mimic possession. They're not
Mm.
mutually exclusive. Someone could have one of those obstacles and they
Mm.
could have an attachment of some kind. Um, Demon possession in and of itself is extremely rare, plain and simple. Most of the time, it's an attachment, meaning that it's something outside of the person that is linked to their chi or their
Mhm.
mana or their prana or their aura.
Mhm.
They're linked somehow.
Mhm.
And that, again, if they're carnivorous spirit by nature or parasitic, they just need something else. And how do you supply that and then let go?
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. I love how you present it as like an ecosystem, and I feel like a lot of what has conditioned so many of our beliefs in Western society, at least, is Hollywoodization of things, and not just this on this topic, but everything. Like for our daughter, we had a natural home birth, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences, just seeing the rawness of life. And yet if you were to get an idea of what childbirth looks like from movies and things, it's like the woman's strapped down and screaming her head off, and the baby's pulled out and slapped, and it's like it is violent. And I think a lot of that, you know that polarity. It's interesting you brought up the Catholic faith, because I'm actually a Catholic reject. They wouldn't baptize me when I was a baby because my mom had been previously married. So when, she wasn't a practicing Catholic, but people do what they think everyone's supposed to do. And when she asked her church, they're like, nope. So it gave me a very like out of the box, and choose my own adventure kind of life. And I've reflected a lot on that particular religion, and all the kind of the the fragmented nature of a lot of Christian faiths, and like the different views, and also respect to like essentially one teaching, like you said, on one continent that was contextual to the people of that time. And I do believe that every master has a universal a connection to that universal truth, but how they teach it could be akin to like one teaches math and another teaches English and another teaches arts, and it's very different, right? And um,
Right.
because when I think of like those two extremes of society that are often played out like that, are battling one another, and I feel like that belief that there is this battle between good and evil is part of the problem.
Mhm.
And it's really the same religion, like to me, like Catholicism or Christianity and Satanism is this, it's two coins of the same religion. And it makes sense for people who feel marginalized and want um, to have self-importance would choose one side, and those who have felt maybe have gone through the suffering and want to just surrender and have someone to surrender to as a bypass would choose the other side. But it's
Right.
essentially the same core religion. So
Right.
and that's probably controversial to some people to hear, but that's my viewpoint on it.
I actually very much agree with you in that. And at BearBridge Academy, one of the religions we do have for people to take is Luciferianism. So again, it breaks down any of the um, hyperbole around it, and instead just go to class. No one's going to indoctrinate you. Just go to class, just
Yeah.
learn. And I want to be clear that the Catholic version of the exorcism is ineffective. I am not saying that Catholicism is a bad religion.
Yeah, neither am I.
What I would love is actually if the Catholic Church would hire me to educate them on here is a new way, and it's not new, it's really old, but what if we fused these versions to make it more effective? And what if you hired a dark medium that could actually interact with it instead of a priest who doesn't have those specific psychic skills?
Mm-hmm.
What if we put you together as a team so that you're not just flying in with weapons, and
Mm-hmm.
you can instead learn hostage negotiation. You can learn cryptozoology and animal care. You can learn these other skills also instead of just memorize text,
Mm-hmm.
or become a team and bring in someone who
Mm-hmm.
has a specific set of skills that you don't have.
Mm.
Wouldn't that, I mean, in any other form of business, that's
Yeah.
what you do. You
Yeah.
bring in people who have a specific set of skills
Mm-hmm.
for effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that were the case.
It's a very pragmatic and interesting perspective. And, you know, on the same note, like I know there have been some of my friends from the Christ Way community who study the Christ letters who have gone to like Rome to hand out, distribute the letters, you know, and I feel like, you know, JFK talked about this, right? Like one of the biggest problems of our society is secrecy and not just having open dialogue with people. And, you know, there are, you know, there is, you know, there are, I think, you know, I wouldn't consider them true power because I think anything that's of the egoic power in terms of hierarchy is it's illusory in terms of like the real power. But there are hierarchies in this world that have kept our um, maybe the evolution of our consciousness in a way, whether it's for the motives of just like being extractive or parasitic or like keeping like even like I think financially we're not educated to know how to be good financiers or to grow business at education or how to move our bodies or take care of basic things like there's a reason for that. I don't think it's just because we're ignorant as a species. I think so. I I do I one of the refreshing things that that is talked about in the letters is like it's a calling for people of all faiths and all traditions to come together to co-create an enlightened world, whether they're Taoists or Muslim or atheists or scientists or witch doctor or whatever. Like we all have a role to play, and I think if we can expand to see like this whole large family of humankind as a team that we're here to because it's not just about us. Like we tend to be so human centric, and I loved how you brought in the animal, you know, in all of our other relationships. Like we have a responsibility to all of the relations, like the rock people and the tree people, and like we're all part of this ecosystem here. And when we're in stewardship and we're not worried about not having enough because we realize like abundance is actually our natural state, we can all actually return to harmonious living, practice our arts and our creative expression, and co-create a time where we're thriving and flourishing together. And no way do I think that's boring at all. I think it sounds really fantastic. Yeah. So thanks for being one of those lights in the world, Ali, and bringing all those seemingly divergent studies together.
Thank you. I'm grateful for the place to sit in as a light. I know anything can be taken away, so I'm grateful to be able to take up that space.
Mm, wonderful, wonderful. Before we sign off, I just love to ask you, how can people best connect with you and yeah, learn more about BearBridge and maybe you know reach out to you one on one if you still have those services that you offer.
Thank you. BearBridge Academy is the website, and it's bear as in rar, not bear as in ah. BearBridgeAcademy.com is the school. And like I said, we offer lots of different things. And I know that there's something that you mentioned that some people are scared of, because at BearBridge Academy, in our witchcraft department, we don't edit books. We don't edit education either, which means that we do also offer dark magic. And that makes some people uncomfortable. And here's the thing, is when we start editing books, we start preventing us from moving forward. In fact, our healers in our healing department, I encourage them to take cursing classes, because if they don't know the illnesses and where they come from, then they aren't an effective healer. You need to know what is happening from people who can curse and can hex and can harm. So take class and learn. Learn about it. Learn it like infectious disease class. Go learn. So I
Interesting.
just want to say that at BearBridge, we offer lots and lots of different things for people to go down the path that they are meant to go down. And if people want to either work with me one-on-one in tutoring or hire me for my services, you can find me through BearBridge or my name.com. It's alycardinalli.com. So they'll see the name in, it's in the title. They just add .com to it and you'll find me. And then you can contact me those ways. You'll also be able to find my books, like the 7 Psychic Paths that I mentioned. Also, my first book is Witchdoctor, Exorcist. It's one of a 8-part book series that will come out. The first book is on the most provocative subject, being an exorcist. And it's part memoir, part textbook. So if you really want to know what it's like to be an exorcist, I go through my failures as well, not just here are all the great things, oh, I accomplished this, but where I got myself almost killed and relearned about my own fragility. You can find that through my website. And then if you're a social media person, BearBridge Academy is on Instagram and Facebook. I myself am on Substack.
Okay, awesome, Aly. We can certainly put those things in the notes as well. And I always like asking our inspiring guests, if you had a megaphone and you could talk to the whole world and everyone could hear you all at once, what would you like to share?
Put down the rubber ducky if you want to play the saxophone.
That's great.
I learned it from Sesame Street, and so many people want to be spiritual, but they won't put their phone down. Put down the rubber ducky if you want to play the saxophone. If you want to listen to spirit, because they're talking, you have to actually look around and free up your hands.
Yeah, very timely and contextually sound message. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your presence and for the work and for expanding our conversation here. And I appreciate all the beautiful perspectives that you've brought, and some of the more challenging ones too. I'm sure some of our listeners face what are you talking about? Because you're certainly an encyclopedia of different perspectives, and I think I think you're in, you found a beautiful place to gather people around that. And I wish all of your students at BearBridge and all the people you touch, highest blessings and best wishes, Aly. And is there anything else you'd like to share before I invite our daughter to thank us all for watching?
No, just thank you. That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, I appreciate you, and I'm going to invite Luciana to come and say thanks for watching. And to all our listeners out there, blessings and highest wishes for the rest of your day. And yeah, let us know what you think, and go check out Aly's work. And when is your book coming out, by the way, Aly?
My next book, which will be on how to teach shamanic practices, is called Witchdoctor Totem, and that will come out mid-May.
Okay, wonderful. We'll stay tuned for that. Okay, well,
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. You say ciao ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
I love you so much.